Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaye Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantam Anupeta Apeta Krityam Rapayano Virahakatara Ajuhava Putreti Tan Mayataya Taravo Benedus Tam Savabhutam Hridayam Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Bhaktya Vihina Paradalakshay Keep Tachtakamadi Tarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Tave Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Yeti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanadike Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, we're going to continue with Sri Madhurya Kadambini, the last part of this third shower, verse 5. And we're going to begin by offering our most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus. Unto Sri Guru Parapadmana Jalita Bhavishta Om Vishnu Padasto Tarsat Sri Simad Abhaya Charnaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Mahasrila Prabhupada and Sri Guru Parapadmana Jalita Bhavishta Om Vishnu Pad Asto Tarsat Sri Simad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Raj unto our exalted Rupanuga Guru Varga and all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So, the last thing we heard was about having understood the terrible danger of aparad, right? Nam aparad is the most fearsome thing because, if we are lax or deliberately misuse Sri Nam, callously, cavalierly, whatever, selfishly, then all the benefits of bhakti can be denied us, and whatever we've developed up to that point can be lost. But then over time, just like with a disease, when you have a terrible fever, with time, the effects of that fever may diminish, and by continuing to take medicine and gradually with nourishment, the body can regain strength. So even if one falls away from bhakti, one has to be corrected, right? There has to be some punishment there because of those offenses. But Krishna's always calling to all of his separated devotees. And so after some time, a sense of remorse and regret may enter into the heart of that individual. And by the influence of time, gradually, the negative feelings in the heart that cause one to leave bhakti will diminish, and one will gradually want to come back. And slowly, the opportunity will come, and we can be reestablished on that path, right? So the last thing we heard is, to the degree that a person's aparad is removed, his bhajan is nourished, and he becomes astonished by bhajan ras. The divine names and qualities of Bhagavan are utterly capable of instantly bestowing the wealth of prem. Nevertheless, as long as aparad remains within the sadhak, it is appropriate to set out the stages of Shraddha, Sadhusanga, Bhajana Kriya, and Artana Vritti Nishta, and so on. So these different stages, on the one hand, they reflect the uncovering and the development of bhakti in the heart, love for the Lord and the Lord's devotees. On the other hand, they also reflect the degree to which offense is being removed from the heart, right? And again, we point back to that chart, which gives you a very clear visual idea in the graphs that are there. And that last point, chanting Harinam, engaging in sincere bhajan, can award prema instantly, right? The power is there. Krishna's mercy is there, and sometimes he does. Sometimes he does. The process of receiving this gift of prema, this gift of love of God, it comes through the mercy of the Lord himself or through the mercy of the devotee, right? Generally through the mercy of the devotee. It's, when Krishna appeared, he gave prema some, but not as much. But when he came as a devotee, as Mahaprabhu and Nityananda and Advaita Acharya, and then his empowered associates, then prema was given through them. And in Mahaprabhu Leela, it was given very freely, even to the most unqualified, astonishingly. The only ones that were bereft of it were people who were offensive to his dear ones, his devotees. And they had to suffer. But even them, like Gopal Chakravarti and Gopal Chapala, they also had an opportunity to be forgiven and be restored. Devananda Pandit, right? He offended the Lord's devotee indirectly by not protesting when his students, through Srivas Pandit, who was in internal ecstasy hearing the Bhagavatam verses recited by Devananda Pandit, threw him out of the building and into the road. And he didn't object. And Mahaprabhu became so angry. And so Devananda Pandit was bereft of any opportunity. At that time, he'd not really been a real devotee, but he was a reciter of the Bhagavatam, living in Navadvip, all the opportunity there. But later, he got the mercy of Akeshwar Pandit, and thus was given entrance into the intimate circle of Mahaprabhu, among all of his devotees. So now we're going to read some verses, and this is where things get really subtle, because we've heard the general result of aparad and the general result of neglecting the practices of bhakti, performing inappropriate activities, sense gratification, all of these as symptoms that aparad is still in the heart, right? The inability to uphold vows, right? Unsteadiness in one's practice. So now we're going to hear something which has to be, I just have to say that this part has to be studied really carefully. Anyway, you'll see what I mean as we go into these verses. So, the heading is, the bhakta is free from offenses and prarabdha karma, even if devoid of prema or undergoing external miseries. Okay? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, sometimes, upon not perceiving the symptoms of prema in devotees who are fixed in their practice of Nam Kirtan, and upon witnessing their inclination to perform misdeeds, some people attribute it to offenses to the holy name. Right? So this description of that kind of devotees, fixed in the practice, right? And remember in Bhagavad Gita that verse, apichat sodoracharo, Bhajate Mam Ananyabhak, when Krishna is describing the practitioner who may appear to perform misdeeds, appear to be sinful, but he considers him saintly. What kind of person is that? The Ananya Bhak. He's fixed in his practice. He's got great devotion, right? But he may have an inclination to perform misdeeds. Ooh, that's very hard to understand. And people will attribute that to offenses to the holy name. But this is somebody who has progressed to the point where the prarabdha and aprarabdha karma have been destroyed. What is that? Remember at what stage that happens? By nishta, those karmas are destroyed. They're destroyed. So sometimes upon not perceiving the symptoms of prema in devotees who are fixed in their practice of Nam Kirtan, and upon witnessing their inclination to perform misdeeds, some people attribute it to offenses to the holy name. Not only this, but upon witnessing the significant material miseries faced by such devotees, they also assume that the fructified result of these devotees' sinful actions, that prarabdha pap, has not been fully destroyed. So they attribute the suffering, whether it's some kind of terrible disease or poverty or whatever it is, right? That's because of prarabdha karma, right? It is determined throughout Shastra that Ajamil was free from aparad. Although Ajamil had named his son Narayan and uttered that name again and again each day to call him, he was devoid of prema. Moreover, it was perceived that he was inclined to perform sinful acts, such as keeping association with a prostitute. Although the Pandavas, headed by Yudhishthir, had no prarabdha karma, they were seen to suffer many types of worldly tribulations. So there's a gradation of understanding this that he's saying here, and this is going to be explained more. Okay, who do we not see the symptoms of prema in? We don't see them in Ajamil, right? But we also see that Ajamil was apparently immersed still in worldly life, degraded worldly life, taking intoxication, living with his prostitute wife, engaging in theft and all kinds of abominable activities to acquire wealth, right? So he's still inclined. But was this because of karma, right? Because karma, has different stages. There's prarabdha, which is the manifest karma, the body we get, the results we receive in this lifetime. Aparabdha means unmanifest. But before they're manifest, there's kuta, which is the desire is very strong. The sinful result and the sinful activities are almost ready to manifest, right? Just like when we live in this body, when we're born in a child's body, we many of the inclinations and things that we're meant to experience later are not manifest. There's no real sex desire in a child, no inclination to take intoxication and do terrible things. But as one's body matures, the prarabdha karma matures, and what was kuta then becomes prarabdha. And then there's bij, which is subtle, different gradations of desire, which are more subtle than kuta, right? So if you look back on your own life, you might see that, right? So the Pandavas, on the other hand, they had prema, right? There's no question that they did not have prema. They're eternal associates, and yet we see them suffering as well. They suffered differently than Ajamil, but Krishna put them through terrible tribulation, right? From the material perspective. but their experience and inner mentality about all of it is very different. And you can read about that, Queen Kunti's prayers and her reflections on that. And in chapters 16 and 17, where Maharaj Parikshit confronts Kali and speaks with the Dharma of the bull and questions them about their suffering, he and Mother Earth, and their mood and reflection on it. And Srila Prabhupada gives some very wonderful purport about that. But let's move immediately to this commentary by Srila Narayan Maharaj. It has already been stated that when the symptoms of prema do not arise, despite a person's engagement in devotional practices, such as namakirtan, it evidences the presence of aparad. Okay. The author now states, however, that this principle is not universally applicable. It is also seen that some persons, although devoid of aparad, manifest no symptoms of prema and still maintain a tendency to sin. So this is the extensive nature, trying to understand prema and bhakti. That generally, right, when you have a tendency to sin and all, it's because we're still afflicted by aparad. We've not been purified enough. But sometimes that's not the case. It's not universal. It's a general principle, but it's not universal. And so we have to understand these subtleties. Otherwise, we may make mistakes in our dealings with Vaishnavas, right? It has been determined throughout Shastra that, right, let me just read that last thing again so we can, the author now states, however, that the principle is not universally applicable. The principle of unfortunate circumstances, tendency to commit sin, result of aparad. Not always from aparad. It is also seen that some persons, although devoid of aparad, manifest no symptoms of prema and still maintain a tendency to sin. It has been determined throughout Shastra that Ajamil was free from aparad. Had he not been, it would not have been reasonable for the Vishnu Dutas, the emissaries of Sri Vishnu, to come to protect him as a result of his uttering a semblance of the holy name, Nam Abbas, when calling his son. Right, if he was an aparadi, the Vishnu Dutas would not have come, but they were sent directly by the Lord himself, right? So his situation has to be different. Ajamil had named his infant son Narayan, but although he would call him by that name many times each day, prema was not visibly awakening in him. Furthermore, he was disposed to committing the sin of maintaining a relation with a prostitute. Nonetheless, he was not offensive, and his tendency to keep that relationship out of past habit was not a sign that he had committed aparad. This was established when Sri Vishnu's envoys came to protect him simply because he had called the name of his son Narayan at the moment of death. Right? So that's the distinction. Chanting the name offensively is going to result in all these unfortunate things that we described, and especially blocking one's development and advancement in bhakti, right? So that's what we really, really have to work on, right? We have to focus on what is aparad. At the same time, because a very important part of our development of bhakti comes in the association of devotees, taking guidance and instruction from advanced devotees and avoiding unfavorable association. And in the community of devotees, all different levels of personalities we have to be able to learn how to deal with them appropriately. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for instance, sings, let me, praying to the Lord, let me honor every devotee according to their position or their eligibility. And that way I'll be able to chant Harinam without offense, right? So that's an important part of Nam Seva, that if you offer respects, honor, and service to a devotee on the Kanishta level, for instance, that should be offered to one on the Madhyam or the Uttam level, then that's wrong. That's wrong. We can honor all Vaishnavas appropriately. There's no harm. And we can honor even ordinary jiva souls, knowing that within the body they inhabit is the Lord is there. Right? And so we can offer all respect to others. Amanina manadena, right? But to offer a Kanishta or even a Madhyam, the respect and honor due a Mahabhagavat is inappropriate, right? And so that's brought about, and that's why Srila Rupa Goswami in beautiful Upadesha Amrita, which is a condensed instruction of all the different levels of bhakti, gives that instruction also. Who's the first class, who's the second class, who's the third class, right? And then seeing somebody who may be appearing to be afflicted by the results of karma and sin and aparad, but he may be a great devotee. And just like the Ganga, right, sometimes shows mud and foam and bubbles during the rainy season, but the Ganga itself is eternally pure, so a great devotee may seem to be afflicted. And like Narottam Das, at the end of his life in this world, he was also afflicted by paralysis. And those who were opposed to him became bold in their criticism and said, oh, this is because of his aparad, right? That he has, he's not a Brahmana, and he has instructed and given initiation to Brahmanas, and he's committed so many offenses to the scriptures and other things. And when Narottam heard that from his disciples, and his disciples had no argument against it, he just got up from his bed, where he had previously appeared to be paralyzed, and he began to perform Harinam Sankirtan throughout the town of Keturi, and for hours and hours, jubilant, energetic, ecstatic kirtan, so that everyone could see that he was transcendent, and that devotees will accept these different conditions for teaching, like our Srila Prabhupada. When you see him in his last days in the bed, you think, oh my God, like it seems like he's suffering under the influence of the material energy. But why did he do that? He said, lying there, he said, do not think this will not happen to you. In other words, don't think that by practicing bhakti, you can get material happiness and freedom from the suffering, especially the suffering of old age. He said, you will also have to experience this, right? To make us serious and separate the happiness and distress of this world as fruits of bhakti, right? Or the punishment, from aparad. Sometimes devotees will accept that voluntarily, like the Pandavas also, right? And the Pandavas accepted this, and they were showing how their prema and their love was undeterred, right? So Queen Kunti said, you put us through so many difficulties, and she lists them all throughout the life of her sons from a young age all the way through the battle of Kurukshetra and after that. And she said, well, but we didn't mind, because throughout all of that, we were able to remember you. What is it? Vipada sarutashashvat tata tata jagad guru. And so we let the suffering come again and again, right? Because we always remembered you. It actually made our devotion stronger. And we became even more dependent and in love with you. And what's the result of that? Apunar bhavadarshana. And then we no longer see repeated birth and death. So for the devotee, this is a cause for remembering the Lord even more. And even for someone who's on a less developed platform, but who is a nanya, it's not because of sin, it's not because of aparad, it's because the Lord himself wants us to taste that, experience that within this material body for his own purposes. So that is explained also in this. The one purpose, though, is so that, because even in the advanced stage of bhajan, from anishta to nishta, when you come into nishta, just entering into nishta, there's one symptom called taranga rangini, where all of a sudden you're a very solid, fixed, strong devotee. Even although not tasting Shuddhanam yet, somebody in nishta, it's quite respectable and high. And what happens then? People offer you all kinds of things. All kinds of material facility may come at that point. The waves of material opportunity and enjoyment are offered to you. Disciples giving you money, giving you praise, giving you recognition. You become learned, respected, honored. And then the seeds of pratishdasha are very hard to remove, right, when you taste this stuff. So, this next verse, Sri Nam Prabhu may not reveal himself despite being pleased with the devotee. So that person is experiencing these things. Why? And why are we not tasting prema? Are we not making any advancement? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, thus, just as a fruit tree only gives fruit seasonally at a suitable time, similarly, the name of Bhagavan, being pleased with an inoffensive sadhak, again, inoffensive to Harinam, inoffensive, within that is included inoffensive to devotees, to everyone, right? Humble, joyful service attitude, right? So, Bhagavan, being pleased with an inoffensive sadhak, bestows his mercy at the appropriate time, not immediately. The multitude of sins resulting from the influence of devotees' former habits are insignificant, just like the bite of a defanged snake. So even at that point, inoffensive. So this is the marginal, there's somebody who's like even in Madhyam, this refers to that. They're not getting the full fruit of prema. And even in Madhyam, something unfortunate may appear in their behavior or in their character, right? And that's why that verse of Rupa Goswami, Drishtai Swabhava Janitayas Vapusascha Joshire. Somebody may have a body of deformed or full of boils and lesions, or very ugly, right? Bad teeth, all these things. This is generally attributed to karma, right? But it's not with the devotee. And also, the word swabhav means they may have a very disagreeable nature, right? There's a nice, in that Nectar of Instruction by Srila Prabhupada, he comments on that. And in the book, The Essence of All Advice, Srila Narayan Maharaj reads Srila Prabhupada's comments, his purports, and then dives deep and explains his purports even more for us. And he emphasizes that swabhav, that nature where they may appear to be harsh or angry. Some of the great devotees, they had that. Some of our acharyas, they manifest different kinds of personalities. And some of them appear very strict and fearsome, right? Or it's chastising. And even one of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's disciple, was his name? Um, his second was Bharti Maharaj. What was the first part of it? Um, anyway, he became the spiritual, the Shiksha guru of Sri Rup Siddhanti Maharaj. When Siddhasrupananda Brahmachari, who became Bhakti's Sri Rup Siddhanti later, he was put under the guidance of this Bharti Maharaj, who was very large, very imposing, and very strict, and he would sometimes beat this young brahmachari. And everybody was afraid to be with him. And when Saraswati Prabhupada said, oh, they tell me you're being treated very harshly and beaten by Bharti Maharaj. Do you want to serve under someone else? And he said, oh, no, Bharti Maharaj has so much love for me. He knows my faults. And so he beats me for my benefit. I only want to serve under him. He had no qualms about that at all. He recognized the position. So of this disciple of Srila Saraswati Prabhupada, this senior godbrother. And so he thought, okay, great. He's helping me in development of my bhakti. And so he didn't see this as unfavorable at all. Trivikram Maharaj was fearsome to many devotees. Nobody wanted to serve him. He could be very harsh at times, but he was also very loving and very gentle and soft at others. So the svabhav, that mentality or that personality, may not be understood either. We're reading about Vamsi Das Babaji, completely impossible to understand, because his behavior and character was so outside of normal sadhak, right? Who's practicing according to rules and regulations. So both those on the intermediate level, even those on the perfected level, may appear to perform an activity which is outside the proper rules and regulations. So, a fruit-bearing tree delivers fruit at the appropriate time only. Similarly, although Sri Hari may be pleased with a person devoid of aparad, he only delivers the result of his sadhana to him at a suitable time. It is thus understood that the heaps of sins that inoffensive Ajamil committed out of habit were as harmless and insignificant as the bite of a fangless serpent. So back to the level of someone who's not very advanced at all, because he'd never heard the glories of Sri Nam from a devotee. He'd never had the association of devotee, but he chanted Nam Abbas continuously. So his sins were all destroyed. But his tendency to commit sin was still there. But it wasn't motivated any longer by the inclination of ripening seeds, right? Instead, it was, it's described in other purports that it's because he had a material body that had been inclined for so long that just like a snake, if you take its fangs out, it's still going to have the tendency to bite, but that bite won't produce a life-threatening effect. It won't inject poison, and it won't cause harm or death. So this is just the unwinding of the fan, so to speak. The fan had been unplugged, right? So the tendency of that fan to spin strongly was ended, but it was still spinning just because it had already been wound up so much, right? So Ajamil had these tendencies, and so he still performed them. So someone else who may be on the path of sadhana very seriously, not like Ajamil, he's an extreme example to teach us, but somebody who's practicing bhakti sincerely, it may seem that once in a while something happens to them. By circumstance, by neglect, something might happen, and they may do something inappropriate. But it's not due to aparad or sinful, prarabdha karma, right? And so in that case, you overlook it. But who is that person? The Ananyabhak, right? One who's fixed in bhajan, right? So both qualities have to be there. Just because somebody is assigned the title of great devotee because of a position or in an institution or they have a high position in Varnashram or they can speak in a very learned way, that in itself does not qualify one as a bhakta that's being described here. They have to be seen to be really fixed in bhajan, really fixed in service to the devotees, fixed in service to the mission of Guru, all of these things, right? So that's why these verses like Apichet Suduracharo, they're misused often as well, right? Oh, anybody that has served in any capacity, if they're performing terrible activities, we say, oh, Apichet Suduracharo. But if one is still on the level of, lower level of Kanishta, if they're offending devotees, if they're misusing their position, if they're chanting the holy name and yet still offending and they don't care, these kind of people, this doesn't apply to. It applies subtly to people who have made progress so that they're ananya, right? Their faith is one-pointed, it's fixed. Their sadhana is generally very one-pointed, very steady, right? They've progressed. And then occasionally something might be there, but, Krishna overlooks it. We may not overlook it because we are fragile and we have a tendency to criticize, but Krishna will overlook it because he considers them a sadhu. And he wants them to continue in their practice. So then, Bhagavan personally confers suffering upon his devotees to increase their humility and eagerness. So, these tendencies towards sinful activity and other suffering, this may come from Bhagavan, this does come from Bhagavan himself for devotees at that level. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, whatever disease, lamentation, or distress may be perceived in devotees is not due to their prarabdha karma. In the scriptures, Bhagavan himself states, and this is a famous verse, Yasyaham manugranami harishe taddanam shanai tato dhanam tajantyasya Swajana Dukkha Dukhitam. 88th chapter of the 10th canto. Parikshit Maharaj asked a question about how come devotees of Lord Shiva experience great opulence, oftentimes, and happiness in this world, and devotees of Lord Vishnu, who's the Lord of all, generally they often at times seem to be suffering and very poverty-stricken. I mean, Vishnu, he's the husband of the goddess of fortune. Why could he not, and does not bestow great wealth and happiness to his devotees? And why does Lord Shiva, who is the ruler of the modes of nature, bestow happiness to his devotees? I mean, okay, you can understand that, but then why not Vishnu's devotees? So, in this verse, Shukadev Goswami says, well, your Yudhishthira Maharaj, your grandfather, right? He also, not grandfather, your uncle, right? Asked this same question, right? And so, grandfather, right? Parikshit. God, I'm so foolish. Anyway, asked the same question, and Krishna answered him thusly. I gradually take away all the wealth of the person I favor. Experiencing hardship upon hardship, my impoverished devotee is abandoned by his kith and kin. That's kind of a fearsome verse for us who are attached to our condition. And Srila Prabhupada even said when he had taken initiation, and his intention, he was very successful in his business, was to make a lot of money and give it to his guru for his mission. And he says, example, but he's saying, when I heard this verse, I was horrified. horrified. And anybody can relate to that. If you've got a lot of money and you're thinking, I'm going to use it for service, you can't remove your own attachment from that. The attachment is still there, even though your intent for service is also there. So thinking, no, this is how I want to serve, you know. But Krishna says, I'll do it because I favor you. And when you're in that hardship, upon hardship, one thing after another, then even your friends and relatives, people that used to admire you, so-called, and give you respect, it turns out it was just based on your wealth and your position, and they really didn't care for you at all, and they'll abandon you. And then your only shelter after that is Krishna himself and Krishna's sincere devotees. So, then Vishwanath Chakravarti goes on to say, Bhagavan also has said, severe disease and poverty are the symptoms of my mercy. We find many such statements in the scriptures. Bhagavan, the benefactor of his devotee, is indeed most adept at increasing his devotee's humility and eagerness through suffering. So that's why it comes, to make us humble and eager, right? Eager for his bhakti, through that suffering, through those obstacles. Since the devotee is free from the result of his previous activities, the suffering he endures is given by Bhagavan, it is not prarabdha. This is the opinion of those who know the truth. And in that 16th chapter of the first canto that I alluded to before, when Parikshit Maharaj requests the Dharma of the bull to say, who gave you this suffering? He doesn't answer directly. He just gives all these different, some say it's because of this, some say it's because of that. Ultimately everything comes from the hand of the Lord. And Parikshit Maharaj understood that, you must be a great devotee. You must be the personification of religion himself. And then Srila Prabhupada gives very beautiful purport about this same idea, that the devotee sees everything as the hand of the Lord, and that Krishna puts suffering on them to actually glorify them, to show that no matter what the condition, the devotee is undeterred in their devotion. It's a form of glorification of their tolerance and complete fixation on love of the Lord. So, that's the last verse on this third shower, the commentary by Srila Narayan Maharaj. Even though some devotees have no fructified sinful reaction, some persons, upon seeing their material miseries, such as disease, lamentation, and poverty, as well as their sinful proclivities, so not just suffering, but proclivity to still perform inappropriate behavior. This is a very significant statement in this purport. Mistake these to be the result of their prarabdha. So even in these devotees, not only do they get suffering, but they also may exhibit a tendency towards sinful activity, right? But is this from prarabdha karma? No. But were the various, and he gives the argument, were the various troubles given to the five Pandavas, headed by Yudhishthira Maharaj, their exile to the forest, and their inclination to play dice, caused by their prarabdha? They are Sri Krishna's eternal associates. So it goes without saying that they have no such prarabdha, right? So, in the case of Yudhishthira, in some commentaries, this tendency to play dice is seen as a kind of a fault. It's an aspect of Kshatriya dharma, Kshatriya mentality, to gamble, right? And it led to them losing everything, right? And you could say, oh, how unfortunate, right? Oh, that he had this sinful tendency. But it was actually the influence of Lila Shakti, internal energy, not prarabdha karma, not the modes of material nature, so that all kinds of extraordinary pastimes will thus take place, right? There are times in the forest and ultimately leading up to the penultimate battle of Kurukshetra, where Bhagavad Gita was spoken and the world, by the desire of the Lord, was purified of all these sinful kings. So the Pandavas may even show some inappropriate proclivity. Bhimasena was possessed of voracious appetite. Sadhu doesn't have that, right? But it was his personality and body that he was given to perform extraordinary pastimes. Quite relishable, actually, the personality of Bhimasena. And he could be angered very quickly, whereas Yudhishthira was more calm and patient. They all exhibited different qualities, which you could attribute to prarabdha karma, but they're eternal associates, right? So, what about someone who's not an eternal associate? It was previously mentioned that prarabdha is destroyed by sadhana bhakti. The Mahajanas state that even at the stage of liberation, the prarabdha of jnanis who have realized Brahm do not dissipate without their having to suffer it. Such fearsome prarabdha is easily destroyed, however, when bhakti manifests in the living entity's heart, due to his having engaged in any aspect of bhakti, such as nama kirtan. So jnanis, they can become very high-level sadhus, right? Detached from all things, but they're not free from what they're destined to experience in this lifetime, this prarabdha. But a devotee is. And then he quotes Rupa Goswami in Sri Namastaka, Yad Brahma Sakshat Kriti Nishtayapi Vinashamayati Vinana Bogai Apati Namas Puranena Tate Prarabdha Karmeti Vadoti Veda. O Bhagavan, in the form of the holy name, the Vedas loudly declare that the devotee's fructified reaction, the prarabdha karma, which cannot be eliminated even by resolute meditation on impersonal Brahm, which is like the flow of an unbroken stream of oil, is at once mitigated by your appearance on their tongue, even without their undergoing any suffering. Realization of knowledge of impersonal Brahm can destroy the results of accumulated past activities and of the activities one is currently performing. But one's sinful and pious fructified reactions are destroyed only by suffering them, not by knowledge of impersonal Brahm. Simply by uttering your holy name, however, that prarabdha karma is destroyed. So, persons like Sobari Rishi, he meditated in the water for 10,000 years, right? And yet, he still had the prarabdha karma of desire, of pride. When the fish took shelter of him and said, "Oh, protect us from Garuda," he cursed Garuda, thinking himself, "I'm a powerful sage. These fishes have taken shelter of me." And he cursed Garuda, right? He's prideful, still had attachment. And then when he saw two fishes interacting for procreation, it stimulated that own desire which had not been purified in his own heart yet. That's his own prarabdha, right? And so he left the water, met the wives of the king, and transformed himself into a youthful body and had 50 wives, right?
The daughters of the king.
Huh?
The daughters of the king?
Yeah, what did I say?
Wives.
Oh, sorry. The wives of the king, daughters of the king. Yeah. Is this my prarabdha karma, my, mixed up brain that's faulty? I guess Krishna's doing this to me to increase my, we get the semblance of karma. It's there, and it's just like prarabdha, but it's not caused, that's been destroyed. So Krishna personally told Uddhava, Bhakti punati mam nishta svapakan api sambhavat. Resolute devotion to me purifies even one who has been born in a family of dog-eaters. 14th chapter of the 11th canto. The fault of low birth is a result of one's prarabdha karma. According to an axiom of logic, removal of the cause, karana, brings about removal of the effect. Accordingly, by acknowledging that the defect of a lower birth, which represents an effect, can be eliminated, it is understood that prarabdha, or the cause, karana, must have been erased already. And that's described in Jaiva Dharma in the chapter when the Muslim priests come to converse with the devotees of Godrum, who receive them very respectfully. And in the next chapter, why they're considered saintly, even though they appear to be in the body of Muslims, is described in a big debate. This is it. This is the reason. Moreover, the Puranas explain that all mental and physical ailments resulting from prarabdha are destroyed by Sankirtan. Adayo vyadayo yasya smaranan namakirtanat tadaiva vilayam yanti tam anantam namamyaham. I offer obeisance to Lord Anantadev. Remembering him and uttering his name immediately dispels all kinds of mental and physical ailments. Thus, even though devotees are free from prarabdha, Bhagavan mercifully gives them worldly disease, suffering, and lamentation in order to increase their humility, eagerness, anxiety, and so on. Right? In Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th chapter, 25th verse, it is seen that Queen Kunti prayed to Sri Krishna only for adversity. It is thus easily understood that hidden within this adversity lies the treasure of prema. The Supreme Lord has directly declared, when I favor someone, I quickly take away his wealth. Then his relatives, considering him wretched, abandon him. At that time, devoid of shelter, he takes full refuge at my lotus feet. Bhagavan has also said, the great ailment of poverty is a symptom of my special mercy. Hence, for the devotee's auspiciousness, Bhagavan purposefully gives him sorrow, a humbling situation, and so on. Thus, because the devotee does not have to undergo the results of his karma, the miseries he experiences can never be said to be the fruits of his prarabdha. So those two things, the various kinds of, three things, various kinds of enjoyment, right, which normally come from, it's an anartha coming from sukriti, pious activities, material suffering, which comes from duskriti, impious activities, right? So, enjoyment, poverty, distress, illness, all of that, but also the various inclinations we have to perform pious and impious activities, that is also in that mix, right? He says he puts him in sorrowful, humbling situations. So going back to that inclination to perform impious acts that Ajamil still had, right? Or going back to that apichet sodoracharo, and you can read about this also in this 6th chapter of 6th canto, 1st and 2nd chapters, and also there'll be other places. That inclination, even for sinful activity, may rise in a devotee. And by mistake or by circumstance, he might do something bad, right? But that's not due to the prarabdha karma. In this case, he's indicating that Krishna himself will allow this to happen So that for some people, what will it result in? It will crush their pride, because we become also prideful about being devotees. Oh, I'm so renounced, I'm so self-controlled, I'm this, I'm that. Look at these others, right? And then when we become afflicted by that which we criticize others for, very humbling. So there's no realm of improper activity that one might perform, which might not be uh, uh, imposed by the Lord himself, except aparad, one's own sinful activity, but not the inclination, like say, oh, I have this, Krishna's going to make me, kill a devotee or or beat a devotee, not like that. That Krishna won't overlook. But we're talking about the realm of sin, right? Not aparad, sin. So, any case, that's the end of this chapter and the commentary. And so I think tomorrow there are some verses that have been quoted here, and I'm thinking I might go to Srila Prabhupada's commentary and commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to examine those verses, because their purports are in relationship to what's being explained here. And then we'll go on to the fourth shower after that. Okay, so we'll stop here. Offer obeisance to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev, our Guru Parampara, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Gaur Premanande, Hari Bol.